Hey there. So, we have a little history lesson today, and it's going to start with a story. When I was a young Catholic girl, I was given a pocket Bible with the words New Testament on the front, and it was referred to as the Good News. But later I learned that that little book was only part of the Bible. There was another section called the Old Testament, which I later learned was the Jewish Bible, the Torah. So, Catholics called the Jewish section of the Bible the Old Testament, and the portion we were given as little Catholic kids and spent most of our time in with the Jesus stories was the New Testament. But as a child growing up into like preteen, I wondered, since we call the New Testament the good news, does that make the Old Testament the bad news? And it was within these moments and other moments that I started questioning everything in the Bible and everyone who spoke about it. Why? Because whenever I asked questions for clarity, I was ridiculed and scolded. We don't ask questions of the Bible. We just do and say as we're told. Now, go say 3 Our Fathers and pray that God will forgive you. I have no hard feelings. Just lots of compassion, because they were also caught up in their narratives and their systems. But to make things more interesting, there's a book called the Apocrypha containing many of the documents that I think should have made it into the Bible. Mainstream Bibles in circulation today have been streamlined and modified for efficiency and control. Do you know who else had a Bible that was streamlined and modified for efficiency and control? Black and brown people that were enslaved in the United States. Google it. It's called the Negro Slave Bible. You can order it on Amazon. I saw very slim copies of these slave Bibles while visiting museums down south. The slave Bible was designed to keep those that were physically entrapped within chattel slavery against their will. Those Bibles were designed to keep people mentally enslaved and spiritually enslaved. People in power needed those enslaved to think that God ordained their slavery. Anything that had to do with freedom was omitted because those in power did not want those that were enslaved to even think about liberation. Slaveholders needed their property to be mentally enslaved. It's ingenious and sick. Can you believe religious folks wanted to keep people mentally enslaved? Can you imagine being the one designing the slave Bible? Well, you know what? We're keeping this because it's about slaves obeying their masters, and we're taking this section out because this is about slaves becoming freed. Slaves don't need to know about that. And we'll never even talk about slaves being freed amongst ourselves. We'll hide it and pretend it was never written. And if by chance they do find it, we'll tell them those parts of freedom are for us. God has given us the power and authority to be free and to enslave. We even have the authority to turn these decisions into laws. So if anyone tries to go against anything we decide, they will be silenced, they will be punished, and maybe put to death. Fast forwarding into today, you want to know what else is interesting? Many of you have Bibles in your homes, on your phones, and many of you have never read it, the whole thing, like a book. Many of you probably just skimmed over the horrendous parts thinking, I'll just stay in the nice, feel-good areas. That brings me peace, joy, and love. Many never ask questions like, God, Why did you do this? Why is this man idolized? He raped, murdered, and deceived others who trusted him. Why are we praising him and singing songs about him? Why was destruction and genocidal murders authorized by God? But you see, when we ask those kinds of questions, we rarely find those who will be honest with us and tell us that what was done was sick. What we find instead are people saying, we can't talk about that. We can't say that because then the whole Bible falls apart. Well, the whole Bible doesn't fall apart. The systems created for us fall apart. When religious texts like the Bible can be seen as it really is, a historical book with nuggets of powerful information about God, gods, and humanity, and we examine these stories through a humanitarian lens, then we will see oppression, patriarchy, religious supremacy, and racism. The Bible doesn't fall apart. The oppressive narratives stemming from the Bible become clearer, and it's our oppressive systems that begin to fall apart. And here's just a side note. English Bibles have been translated from ancient Hebrew and Greek documents, which means there's a lot we don't see and don't understand. Things have been simplified and dumbed down for us. Much has been lost in translation, and many Bibles in different languages across the globe were translated from the English Bible, which means there's even more missing in those Bibles. My hope is that your minds will become free from the powers trying to keep it small, obedient, and manageable. You were created to think critically, ask questions, and do your own research. Yet, you have been programmed to fear anything that's outside of your programming. And it is within your perfectly designed programming where many of you will choose to stay. But many of you have been sensing the tension. So, welcome into the tension. And over the next few months, we'll have much to gently and lovingly unpack together.